The landlords are striking back, filing a lawsuit against Joe Biden to end the nakedly political eviction ban, so they say. Now, Joe Biden enacted an illegal eviction moratorium after the long-standing moratorium had expired. He had gone to the Supreme Court seeking an extension, and the Supreme Court said, "You do not have the authority, nor does this court. Congress must pass legislation." But Congress was unable to do so. It's very difficult to mandate that someone give up their private property to someone else. And long-standing precedent says if the government wants to take someone's property, they have to pay. Eminent domain, for instance. This policy was clearly illegal, and even Joe Biden knew it. Now, many are saying this is going to backfire because Joe Biden is going to lose in the courts. It's going to trigger massive progressive outrage who will then demand that Joe Biden stack the Supreme Court. At least that's the narrative. I'm not quite sure the Democratic establishment would be upset by that, though. I think it's funny. Politico writes a story saying, now you're going to have to pack the court, and that's a bad thing for Democrats. No, it isn't. But the bigger question remains, will we be entering a lockdown? And I think it's entirely possible that we enter some kind of lockdown. I don't think it'll be the exact same as I've mentioned in previous segments and in other segments you may hear today. I think ultimately what will happen is they'll lock down, but then be like, oh, okay, now if you're vaccinated, you're good. It's kind of an inverted vaccine mandate. In New York, they said, hey, if you want to go do a thing, you got to get the vaccine, which is, in essence, a partial lockdown. I mean, it means many people aren't going to be able to go out to certain businesses. These businesses will then suffer and not get as much money. And the idea is, from Bill de Blasio, that he wants to pressure people to get this vaccine. Well, my friends, vaccine boosters may be on the way. Right now, I'm already hearing from many people on the left saying we always knew vaccine boosters were a possibility. Now, there's nothing cleared by the FDA, but some people have already gotten boosters. Those who have gotten the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, because of its lower efficacy compared to the mRNA vaccines, are apparently eligible in some places. I think in San Francisco, they may be giving people boosters already. And there are reports online of people getting actually 4 shots because they're getting 2 different vaccines. I tell you. From the sound of things, it's not going to be ending anytime soon. In fact, some other countries like Australia and New Zealand, we're already seeing the crackdown, the serious enforcement, the lockdowns, the military is being deployed. So I bring it back to the landlords suing Joe Biden. Is this going to end anytime soon? Well, Joe Biden's new moratorium, I think it's about 2 months, and the unemployment payments are still in operation until September. I don't see a good reason why they will just stop. In fact, with the explosion of COVID cases, the reports about nurses quitting and the shortages that we're facing, it seems like we are less equipped now for an outbreak of COVID or a variant than we were a year ago. I mean, think about it this way. They're coming out saying lockdowns, no, we can't do it, but there will be restrictions. A year ago, we were at the peak of, it's a year and a half now. We were at the peak of the American economy. I mean, the economy was doing great. We had all these resources, all this access. People were flush with cash. And then COVID hit. People freaked out, and we were unable to effectively deal with this. Many people lost their livelihoods, lost their jobs, businesses, their homes. The homeless population started going, homeless encampments everywhere. Now, after all of that economic downturn, we do it again? Imagine what will happen if we did it again. But more importantly, are we even able to stave off a major spike in COVID cases in a weakened position? Like I said, we were at our strongest last year. Sounds to me like there very well may be some lockdowns. But first, let's take a look at what's going on with the landlords, because if they win this, it may spell very bad news for the lockdown crowd, the restriction crowd, and it could result in the country reopening. Now, before we get started, head over to timcast.com, become a member to get access to exclusive segments from the Timcast IRL podcast, as well as an ad-free experience when you are browsing our fierce and independent journalism. The mainstream media, they do not like that I am expanding and launching a news outlet. We're doing a fact-checking, a totally separate company, a nonprofit to do fact-checking. I've long talked about this. We've got 2 new shows in the works. We're going to be expanding like crazy. And the competition, the mainstream media, they're not too happy about that. So support our work, smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share the show with your friends if you really like it. Here's the big news. Landlords sue to stop Biden's nakedly political eviction ban. A coalition of 11 housing industry groups said in a statement Wednesday evening that they opposed the new ban. Trade groups representing property owners late Wednesday sued to block a new federal eviction moratorium that President Joe Biden himself warned this week was on shaky legal ground. The Alabama and Georgia chapters of the National Associations of Realtors filed a motion in federal court to vacate the ban that the CDC ordered Tuesday. The same groups led a legal challenge against the prior federal eviction moratorium that expired Saturday, a lawsuit that prompted the Supreme Court to cast doubt on the CDC's authority. The Supreme Court didn't say, you can't extend this. I mean, they did. But what I mean is their statement was broader than that. They said you cannot have an eviction moratorium. Think about it this way. You're a retiree. I once lived in an apartment. I lived in an apartment above. It was in the home of some retirees. They were old. They were in their 60s. And their house was their investment. It was how they were planning on retiring. They did not have a lot of money. Imagine someone lived there and wasn't paying. You're on fixed income. What do you do? And then the government comes out and says, you can't kick them out. They are forcing you to give your home to somebody else. How can the government do that? Well, the Supreme Court says you can't. The real estate groups, which have warned that their members are facing substantial financial losses from the moratorium, said in a legal filing that the CDC caved to a tidal wave of political pressure from outraged Democrats when it revived the eviction ban despite clear warnings from judges who said the agency lacked the power to enforce it. The CDC appears to have acted in bad faith, the group said. The new legal challenge will fuel further chaos around the federal government's safety net for renters still struggling to pay bills during the pandemic. It will likely set off a race against time for policymakers to find ways to accelerate the release of $46.5 billion in rental aid, which was designed to backstop renters and make landlords whole, but has faced severe state and local bottlenecks. They shut the country down. We are now reaping the rewards, I mean that figuratively and sarcastically, of that failed policy. No, okay, I think it's fair to say that many people would say the lockdowns helped slow the spread. But sure, but like a year, it was like a year and a few months of lockdown. Was that really necessary? I'm not going to pretend to know. I will say this is a mess of the government's own doing. You can't sit here and say the government has a right to do things like mandatory vaccines, shut down the country, and not give anybody anything in return, or to say the taxpayers foot the bill. We are not supposed to be this centralized authority nation. That's apparently what we are. Landlords are taking on the Biden administration again after warning that they lost billions of dollars each month under the original ban, which the CDC first implemented in September. The revamped moratorium the agency imposed this week is targeted at areas with high levels of COVID, currently about 80% of counties. A coalition of 11 housing industry groups said in a statement Wednesday evening that they opposed the new ban and that the administration itself noted it lacks the legal authority for a more targeted eviction moratorium, in which case, if he said it, what's stopping you from just evicting people? About half of all housing providers are mom and pop operators. The National Association of Realtors President Charlie Oppler said, without rental income, they cannot pay their own bills or maintain their properties. Biden allowed an earlier iteration of the eviction moratorium to expire Saturday because of Supreme Court warning that the CDC exceeded its authority. But the White House reversed course this week and enacted a more targeted ban in response to a major backlash from Democrats who warned millions of Americans were at risk of losing their homes. I can only imagine. There are a lot of landlords who are Democrats. I can only imagine many of these people right now are fuming. And this is going to spell disaster for Democrats moving into 2022. This may be why we're seeing many independent voters now souring on the economy, on the Biden administration, on Biden himself, and the direction of this country. They say the administration initially said its hands were tied by the June Supreme Court opinion and tried to put the responsibility on Congress to extend the moratorium. But House Democrats could not muster the votes to pass an extension before leaving for August recess. The legislation was also expected to be blocked by Senate Republicans. The industry groups suing the Biden admin on Wednesday recounted the timeline as evidence of why the ban should be overturned. They said the CDC extended the moratorium for nakedly political reasons. The new eviction ban the CDC announced Tuesday is scheduled until October 3rd and applies to counties experiencing high levels of community transmission. The Biden admin scaled back the scope of the ban as it scrambled to come up with a new safeguard for renters. But the revamped moratorium still left landlords irate, said National Apartment Association President CEO Bob Pinnegar. Property owners were livid over the about face after the CDC said in June that an eviction ban renewal through July was intended to be the final extension. The expected challenge from housing industry groups comes after Biden and the White House officials gave conflicting messages about the new policy's legal grounding. More than that, Joe Biden was asked about mandatory vaccines nationwide, and he said, we're still looking into those questions. And then someone came out and said, no, we're not going to do that. Yeah, I think that would be really, really bad for Joe Biden. But Politico, they go on. In a news story, they say how Biden's Supreme Court throwdown could backfire. With candor, he might come to regret the president acknowledged the court's conservative majority could reject his revised eviction ban. President Joe Biden's audacious move to assuage liberals by extending a pandemic-related moratorium on evictions puts him in a position he has so far avoided, inviting a high-profile showdown with the Supreme Court. If the court, as expected, shoots down the policy, it could also wind up fueling the progressive drive for Supreme Court reform that Biden has been so lukewarm about. Quote, "It will be a powerful addition to the progressive bill of particulars against this court, and it could well accelerate the demands for court packing and other muscular steps," said Jeff Schessel, a historian and former speechwriter under Bill Clinton. Under intense pressure from liberal Democratic lawmakers and activists, Biden announced Tuesday about the revamped policy, and this we know. I think it's a silly argument, to be completely honest. Politico. You think Joe Biden doesn't want to pack the courts? You think the Democratic Party doesn't want Democratic control of the Supreme Court? Of course they do. If you wanted to actually push this story saying it would backfire, I'm going to say, no, you mean it sounds more like you're saying it's on purpose. It's not backfiring on Democrats if they pack the Supreme Court and shut down the conservative majority. That's right. What do we got? They add 3 more justices. And then they get just enough. I believe that would be 7 to 6. Would it be 3? They would have to add, I think, 4. But then they want to just get 1 more seat in the majority. That's absolutely in the book for Democrats. Now, the bigger question I have after all of this is the eviction moratorium. It sounds like they're expecting still restrictions and lockdowns. They don't want to just release this right now because it would result, excuse me, it would be harder for them to implement if they do actually engage in a new lockdown. Now, Joe Biden has said it, July 30th. He says the U.S. will, in all probability, see more guidelines and restrictions amid rising COVID cases. Recently, Dr. Fauci said there will not be a lockdown, or I don't think it was that definitive. I think he said something like there will probably be no lockdown. But we have this. CNN reports President Joe Biden said Friday the U.S. will, in all probability, see more guidelines and restrictions amid rising COVID cases and the rise of the Delta variant. Quote, "And by the way, we had a good day yesterday," Biden told reporters on the South Lawn of the White House, referring to what he said were encouraging numbers of people who got vaccinated. Pressed Friday on whether the U.S. is headed for more lockdowns and rising cases, White House Deputy Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters, "The way we see this is that we have the tools in our tool belt to fight this variant. We are not going to head towards a lockdown. Our goal is to make sure that we are not headed towards that. That is not going to be the direction that we take because we have the tools to prevent that." Now, with all due respect, ma'am, it sounds like we are. I don't believe them. It's possible it's not. Maybe I'm wrong. But I do think that they're just trying to ease everyone into it. We can see the policies. The mask mandates are all coming back. What are they going to do? Just like, the mask mandates, we didn't need them. We're going to reverse that right now. Why would they do that? I mean, maybe they would, but they're slowly escalating, not de-escalating. They say the administration's comments come as a new study published Friday by the U.S. Centers for the CDC show the variant produces similar amounts of virus in vaccinated and unvaccinated people if they get infected. The finding was a pivotal discovery leading to the CDC's updated mask recommendation. The problem there, the White House is saying, even though that's true, it is still extremely unlikely a vaccinated person has a breakthrough case. If that were true, then why mandate masks? You see, I don't believe them. If breakthrough cases are exceedingly rare, then regardless of viral load, people will not need to wear masks if they're vaccinated. Why make 99.99% of people wear masks when it's the 0.001 who get a breakthrough case? It doesn't make sense. None of what they do makes sense. They say, Bill de Blasio, you get the vaccine or you get a negative test. But if people who are still having to wear masks because the vaccinated people could be spreading this, then you need to get them tested too. Amazing. I don't believe them. Now, booster shots. You think we're going to see booster shots? I think so. Check this out. From Fox News, June 27th. So this is a couple months ago. Booster may be needed for J&J shot as Delta variant spreads. Some infectious disease experts have already boosted with Pfizer or Moderna. Fox News reported, a few say they have already boosted, even without published data on whether combining two different vaccines is safe and effective or backing from U.S. health regulators. I'm going to stop right there and say, do not do this. It is not approved. There's no data. There is some reporting now that people who have gotten the Johnson & Johnson vaccine have been able to get other vaccines as well. But I'm going to tell you this right now. They talk about some of these alternative treatments for COVID, and YouTube says you can't talk about it because it's not FDA approved. And I'll say the same thing to this. Talk to a doctor. Yeah, make sure it's a doctor who's knowledgeable, who understands what's going on in the world, and make sure you trust them. I'll put it that way. But there has been a lot of talk about these booster shots. And here we go with Dr. Fauci today. Third COVID vaccine shot for people with weakened immune systems. Very high priority, says Fauci. CNBC reports federal health officials are working as quickly as possible to authorize a third COVID-19 vaccine shot for Americans with weakened immune systems. It is clear now that such people, including those with cancer or those who have had organ transplants, in general do not produce an adequate immune response after receiving 2 doses of COVID, Fauci said, of the vaccine. Immunocompromised individuals are vulnerable, Fauci said during a White House briefing. It is extremely important for us to move to get those individuals their boosters. And we are working on that, and we will make that be implemented as quickly as possible. It is a very high priority. Notice how he's talking about boosters definitively. So again, I bring this up because the question is, in relation to the landlords, will there be heavy restrictions or a lockdown? I am leaning towards there will be some kind of heavy restriction. We may not see it as a lockdown in the same way, but I think they're going to implement restrictions, and they're going to be very serious. They go on to say immunosuppressed populations represent only about 2.7% of the U.S. adult population. Still, they make up about 44% of hospitalized COVID breakthrough cases. Studies suggest a third vaccine shot might help patients whose immune systems don't respond as well to the first or second dose. 4 small studies cited by the CDC last month showed that 16 to 80% of people with weakened immune systems didn't have detectable antibodies to fight COVID after 2 shots. Among immunosuppressed patients who had no detectable antibody response, 33 to 50% developed an antibody response after receiving an additional dose, according to the CDC. Now, I want to slow down right there. They're saying even with the third shot, it's between a third and a half, 33 to 50% who actually still responded well. What do you think the response from regular people is? What do you think the response online has been? People being told you've got to get not 1, but 2, and maybe now boosters. Boosters, I think, are coming. But look, this is not new information. It is not me with a profound opinion. I think even Fauci had said in the past, there's a potential for booster shots. They talked about this maybe being a seasonal thing, in which case you'll get your COVID shot along with your flu shot every year. And again, I just tell you, go to your doctor and figure out what makes sense for you, and don't be pressured by internet like me or anyone else. You'd be surprised what your doctor would tell you, so long as you have a good one you trust. They say it is clear from observational data that was made that they do not make an adequate response that we feel would be adequately protected, Fauci said Thursday. Other countries, such as France, are already giving out third shots to people living with cancer or other immune impairments. Israel announced last month it would offer booster shots to people over age 60. Some doctors have been pushing for the U.S. to allow immunosuppressed populations to get an extra dose, and many immunosuppressed Americans are already finding additional doses of the vaccine on their own. Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who led the FDA from 2017 to 2019 during the Trump admin, told CNBC on Monday he believes booster shots will be given to older and immunocompromised people by September or October. They go on to mention that Scott is also a contributor to CNBC. Now, I was browsing Reddit, and I see this story about the third COVID shot, and I thought there was this interaction that was really, really great. First of all, we have this post on Reddit. It says third COVID vaccine shot for people with weakened immune systems, very high priority, says Fauci. And the top comment says, under doctor supervision, my transplant recipient friend got 2 series, Pfizer and Moderna. Antibodies are there. First 2 shots didn't trigger a great response. That's interesting. This person then says, my doctors told me to wait on the booster and that the antibody test isn't really useful since there are no determined required values for immunocompromised patients. In other words, The test results wouldn't really give you an answer about if you are really protected. I'm definitely keeping tabs on the research. I really hope a third or even fourth shot will prove effective. Third or fourth. That's amazing. Now I want to show you. There's a really, really great response here. I tweeted about this. One user on Reddit says, "Nah, I'm good. I went out on a limb getting the first two. Not going to continue to pump myself full of whatever this is." I loved that. I love everything about this interaction. The response. Another user responded by saying, quote, "Full of whatever this is. The science is there. The journals, the research, the studies, the peer reviews, it's all there. You're free to read it yourself if you truly cared about, quote, whatever this is." Another person responded, "That is preferred. We don't need to waste vaccine doses on people like you." And then the next response is, "Oh, come on. They're obviously working. Surely we'll all be immune by the fifth shot." I don't know if that person's being sarcastic. That's why I love this response. First of all, full of whatever this is. Quite literally, you can look it up. You can go to the CDC website. They show you the ingredients list. They show you what is in it. And there's things you might be like, I didn't realize that was in a vaccine. So go look for yourself. Furthermore, the journals and the research, you can read all of it too. But I do think it's funny that the triple vaxxers are now calling the vaccinated or like they're criticizing people who are fully vaccinated. I can't even, my friends. What is wrong with people? Go to your doctor, figure out what makes sense. But what is this tribalist psychotic behavior of like, you should just keep going? Like, dude, calm down. We're not even at the point where we know if we need boosters yet. And they're like, well, then we're not going to waste vaccine doses on people like you. This person says they got fully vaccinated. This is the problem. People go to the doctor. Doctor's like, get the vaccine. They go, okay. And then people online are screaming at the top of their lungs in people's faces. I mean that figuratively with stuff like this. And it freaks people out. This person said, I'm good. I got the vaccine. And the story is about shots for immunocompromised people. And someone's like, well, we don't need to waste doses on people like you. What does that mean? I'll tell you what, man. Take a look at this from Daily Mail. Arkansas hospital overwhelmed with COVID patients is so short on nurses that it's offering $25,000 signing bonus for each of its 230 vacancies. Whoa, 25 grand. Yikes, man. You come to me and say, Tim, do you think there's going to be another lockdown? I say, yes, here's why. I stated it earlier, but I'll stress it again with this context. We had doctors last time around. We had nurses. They were all dancing and doing the Thriller dance or whatever because they had breaks. They were able to take time out to do their TikTok dancing where one group danced with a mock corpse. Creepy, right? Okay, they were able to. Now they're all quitting. They don't want to work anymore. Some nurses are on strike because they don't want to get vaccinated. Some are quitting because the pressure is too great. You think with a shortage of nurses, we're going to be able to get a handle on this time around? Doesn't sound like it makes sense to me. Now, does it? Now, maybe we do. I don't know. We got a vaccine. It's a big difference, right? Last time around, we had doctors, but we didn't have the vaccines. Now we have the vaccines. I tell you this, as always, you got to talk to your doctors, people you trust. And I'm telling you this because of the story we're moving into. Myth Informed tweeted this clip with Joy Reid. Joy Reid and Stephen Colbert suggest that Donald Trump supporters are in a Jim Jones era death cult because of their COVID vaccine skepticism. Wow. This is fake news. Joy Reid's lying. In fact, Joy Reid tweeted some anti-vax stuff last year. Well, I mean, yeah, it was like Donald Trump is bad. Who's going to trust him and stuff like that. Okay. Well, Joy Reid's lying because we all know that Donald Trump is the biggest braggart about how he made the vaccination program work with Operation Warp Speed. We all know he's sitting there going like, the vaccine was mine. It's the greatest vaccine. Everyone agrees. Trump, I get emails from him because, he does that email thing where he's like, the great Trump vaccine. He's bragging about it. He's always been bragging about it. Ron Desantis went out and said, now that we have the vaccine, it's time to reopen. And he went around and he advocated for it very heavily. Trump supporters are not in a Jim Jones era death cult, and I've got the data to back it up. But I think I can explain to you why it is that Joy Reid was saying this. In this story that you may have seen, it's from a couple weeks ago, UPMC, Life-Changing Medicine, with the University of Pittsburgh School of the Health Sciences and Carnegie Mellon University. This is a study conducted by researchers at Carnegie Mellon and the University of Pittsburgh, which found vaccine hesitancy decreased among U.S. adults by 1/3 between January and May. While tentative people are concerned about COVID-19 vaccine safety and potential side effects, those with stronger views tend to distrust the government. So it's not just like this idea of Trump supporters. It's like anti-establishment people, I guess. The researchers published their results on medRxiv, a preprint website, and announced their results today ahead of a peer-reviewed publication. Keep this in mind, not peer-reviewed, that matters. And not to say that peer review is the end-all be-all, but they do assert some very interesting findings. The largest decrease in hesitancy between January and May by education group was those with a high school education or less. That means people who have a high school diploma or are dropouts were more likely to get the vaccine, or they were more likely to be less hesitant. They say hesitancy held constant in the most educated group, those with a PhD. By May, PhDs were the most hesitant group. Well, vaccine hesitancy decreased across virtually all racial groups. Black and Pacific Islanders had the largest decreases, joining Hispanics and Asians at having lower vaccine hesitancy than whites in May. I don't know what that means. They do mention that counties for Trump supporter counties were more likely, they showed higher hesitancy, and the difference in hesitancy between the areas is high and low. Trump support grew over the period studied. This finding really highlights the politicization of public health recommendations. So it is true. Among Trump supporters, you will find a higher trend of vaccine hesitancy. It is more true that the most hesitant group are PhDs. I don't know why that is. I think, your choices are between you and a doctor, perhaps. Perhaps these PhDs, I don't know. I have no answer. I have to be completely honest. I have no idea why that may be. Do they have they reviewed the studies? Are they anti-establishment? Could it be that many of these PhD individuals are rogue, renegade, Marxist, anti-America, and so they don't believe the government? I have no idea. But I tell you this, when I see Joy Reid saying that it's a Jim Jones era death cult, it feels like what they're trying to do is pressure people. They want you to feel like you're part of the out group, because it's not true. Donald Trump came out and was like, get the vaccine. Joy Reid basically says that in a religion, your savior dies for you. In a cult, you die for your savior. But that's literally not happening. Trump's begging people to get the vaccine. Well, he's not begging. He's like, I'm so great, the vaccine, everyone should get it. How is that him asking anybody to die? Is the opposite, unless there's something Joy Reid's trying to express that I don't quite understand. More importantly, we can see that for some reason, according to this study from UPMC, Carnegie, University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon, it's PhDs, the most hesitant group. You got to understand that these are the kind of things that make people skeptical. But I will tell you this, please do not take these stories as definitive proof. Just because you see that one story which confirms what you already heard does not mean it's true. What I mean by that is you're going to see a whole bunch of stories where they're like, it's a guy who died and he was like healthy and unvaccinated and says, I wish I just had the vaccine and I should have got it. And I look at these stories and I'm like, dude, it's one guy. There's like 10 of these stories. How many people have, been fine after getting the vaccine? It's the same thing with vaccines. You hear a lot of stories about people with adverse reactions. Most people don't even have any adverse reactions. The media is going to crank out stories to freak you out. That includes YouTubers, that includes conservative media, that includes mainstream media. Have a keen, watchful eye. What I'm basically saying is trust yourself and your research. I'm not saying that you should ignore the experts. I'm saying research expert opinion. That's the funniest thing is that meme. It's don't confuse your Google search with my medical degree. And I'm like, if my personal research is literally reading studies from the doctors, then isn't that like providing some weight? It's the weirdest thing to me that they say like, vax research, and it's like a doctor in a lab, it's like anti-vax research, and it's a lady on a toilet. And I'm like, okay, listen, if you're somebody who gets your information from like, superduper news.superduper. whatever, and whatever, some like crazy website where some random guy is like, I heard some crazy thing. It's like, okay, well, you may be getting bad information. You got to be careful there. I'm not going to pretend like every expert is a good person or knows everything, because people are people. But if your research consists of you like reading scientific articles, then I think your Google search is okay. That makes sense. And then you can bring that to your doctor and ask them, hey, I saw this. Like, what do you think about this? See what they say. For all the people that are hesitant, I tell you this, there's nothing there's no fault, there's no harm in going to a doctor. And if you have concerns, dude, how amazing would it be if you have a doctor and you think they're wrong and you say, hey, doc, here's something I read, and show them and see what they say. I'm 100% serious. Don't you want to see? Because I hear people say, like, my doctor doesn't know what he's talking about. Then show him. No, for real. I'm not kidding. You may be surprised. I'm not saying I know how the doctor would react. I think there's a lot of good doctors out there, and you'd be surprised. We have people come through here all the time. They talk to their doctors, and there are doctors who are conservative and voted for Trump and who are anti-establishment. Just find a doctor you trust. I'm saying that because these doctors still are vaccinating the conservative guests we have in this show. Not that I think you guys are all anti-vaxxers or anything like that. And I don't think anyone who's hesitant is an anti-vaxxer. That being said, the bigger question, of course, which I'm trying to come around to, is not vaccines, and I get wrapped up in that stuff. It's lockdowns. The Times of Israel says the government is going to wait to see if the boosters are effective before imposing a lockdown. I highlight this because I want you to pay attention. They say an official in the high-level coronavirus cabinet, speaking on the condition of anonymity, tells the Khan public broadcaster that the government will wait and see the effects of the third vaccine booster shot before declaring a nationwide lockdown. The chances of a lockdown in August are slim. The assessment is that they'll wait 2 weeks to see if the third shot helps bring down serious cases among the over 60s. They're already implementing the third shot, and they're already saying they don't know if it will be effective enough to avoid a lockdown. They do think the chances are slim. We already saw what happened in Australia and New Zealand. The Wall Street Journal says eradication of COVID is a dangerous and expensive fantasy. It seemed to work in New Zealand and Australia, but now ruinous, oppressive lockdowns are back. If these are any indication about what we can expect, we will likely see boosters, and depending on what happens in Israel, we'll see. It's fascinating to me. We're going to be entering the third shot phase. We were in the first, second. Now we're in the third shot phase for some groups. If this continues, I don't see it why it wouldn't. I think everybody will be getting routine yearly shots. And if that continues, don't be surprised if you're getting a yearly updated vaccine card. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all then.